It's a terrifying question that is echoed in the whispers of those closest to the Lamb family. Did Joni Lamb have anything to do with Marcus Lamb's untimely death? What if Marcus's death, the charismatic leader of the Daystar television network, was more than just a tragic accident? What if it set off a series of events that have caused us to doubt the foundation of trust, love, and integrity that once seemed so solid? We move on to Texas, where controversial Christian television CEO Marcus Lamb passed away following his fight with COVID-19. The conservative televangelist made headlines last year following his. Marcus Lamb, renowned for his strong faith and leadership, passed away unexpectedly in November 2021. His death was attributed to complications from COVID-19. However, network Daystar devoted hours of broadcast time to anti-lockdown and anti-vaccination activists and groups. Even as the Christian community grieved, rumors started to spread that his death might not have occurred at the exact moment that it appeared. Could it be that this well-known person's passing served as the impetus for a much darker sequence of events that no one could have foreseen or were? I was caring for Marcus in the hospital on our last night, and at around 3 a.m, she told me, she just looked at me in this dark room I'm there serving and she. These tales are nothing more than the result of grieving minds attempting to make sense of an unfathomable loss. Looked at me and said, "Look what you have done to this family." I recall texting my mother, "I can't do this anymore," and telling God, "You understand how much I'm hurting, you're protecting me, you'll get me out of here." That was my last night there. It was obvious from the start that Marcus' death would rock the foundations of his family, his ministry, and the individuals who had followed his work. But as the months passed, an odd trend emerged. Joni, his wife of more than 30 years, started making contentious choices that only served to heighten suspicions. Additionally, was their relationship genuinely as innocent as it appeared, or were they being manipulated behind the scenes by Doug Weiss, the counselor who appeared to have a startling amount of influence over her life soon after Marcus's death? The story goes that one afternoon I went to Daystar to get something from the cafe. I had my child with me, and I knew she was scared by now, so we stopped taking her there and instead had a nanny at home with her. However, this one time I wanted to get something really. I quickly entered the green room in the afternoon, not expecting anyone to be there, and I took her with me. It was terrible. As I went to get the food box, his wife and my child were so terrified that she went completely limp and fell hard beneath the table. I remember telling other family members, some of whom I trusted, about it, and it was traumatic. I said, "I'm not bringing my child here," but as time passed, the situation only became more complicated. What had begun as a straightforward tale of grief and recovery started to take on a far more complex and unnerving tone. Divorce papers, accusations, and the appearance of profound family divides prompted even more concerns about why things happened so fast, why Doug filed for divorce from his wife of more than 30 years just 2 months after Marcus's death, and why. There's something really unnerving about how quickly the pieces began to fit together. Was Joni so ready to defend her connection with Doug even if many questioned its timing and authenticity? Was this all genuinely a tale of love, or was there something worse hiding beneath the surface? Showed me some documents, emails, and texts, and I said, "Okay, now I'm going to have to go back and talk to Jonathan and Sue, and I'm going to do that this morning to hear their side, but what I won't do is keep going back and..." I went back and forth, saw what they showed me, and heard both sides of the story. I talked to Jonathan and Susie, and I definitely felt some things in the spirit. I'm going to post this interview today, so I'll let everyone talk about it. Examine, critique, and say, "Hey, I'm going to post the interview because that's the fair thing, the right thing. People can feel whatever they want to feel about it." I'll then make a third and final video in which I share what they showed me, which was. As the days and weeks went by following Marcus Lamb's death, I had to go speak with Jonathan and Sue, and then I'm going to get their responses to the things they showed me. I've already begun talking to them about it, and I'm going to make the final video and wash my hands of it. Death, Joni Lamb's and Doug Weiss's conduct came under closer scrutiny. At first glance, Joan's choices appeared to be those of a widow looking for comfort and healing, but the speedy development of her relationship with Doug Weiss soon prompted suspicions. Doug is a counselor with a history of It appeared that helping others with addiction and marriage recovery had bonded with Joni too quickly, because on January 22, 2 months after Marcus's death, Doug filed for divorce from his wife of more than 30 years, and rumors started to circulate regarding the nature of his relationship with Joni at the time. The chronology of events presented an almost too convenient image. Doug and Jan's intimacy was now indisputable, but the rate at which it developed raised concerns about how a relationship based on the trauma of why did Joni, who had recently lost her husband, appear so keen to defend her relationship with Doug even though it was still new and somewhat controversial? Jonathan's unhappiness at not getting his way is another reason why losing a loved one changes so abruptly. I can tell you that as a mother and grandmother, this situation deeply saddens and grieves my heart, because I love my family, all of my children, my grandchildren, and my job. It only got worse after I married Dr. Doug Weiss, who has been such a blessing to me, the rest of my family, and Daystar. We have been together for a long time, and I had hoped that we could have worked things out privately. However, Jonathan has now forced me to speak out, because everyone knows that we have devoted our lives to sharing the love of Jesus, and it is really heartbreaking to see it attacked by my son Jonathan and his wife. Sadly, I want to reassure you that every accusation being made against my late husband and me is wholly untrue. It was evident that for some, this was not merely a tale of recovery and healing, but rather one that was tinged with suspicion and intrigue. The accusations pertaining to Doug and Jan's relationships weren't just about timing, they were also about trust. Were they really acting out of faith as they claimed, or was there another, darker, more calculated factor at work? The backlash Joni received from her loved ones, including her own family, further complicated matters. The wider Christian community, which had previously seen Joan and Marcus as pillars of faith, was now divided between admiration and disapproval of her actions after children Jonathan and Joni Lamb publicly criticized them, adding fuel to the escalating controversy. As these connections and choices developed, the suspicion of a deeper conspiracy grew stronger. Was Marcus's death the tragic end of one? How could someone who had once been so publicly devoted to her husband and family now move so quickly toward another man? Chapter that served as the preface to another, more selfish chapter. The matrimonial dynamics, betrayal charges, and abrupt changes in family allegiance created a picture that was, at best, unnerving and, at worst, scandalous. Furthermore, given how incredibly traumatizing this experience has been for us, it is obvious that we cannot adequately describe what we have endured over the past few years from. I don't even want to go into the details of what that looked like, but it was extremely painful, so yes. When the news came out and people reacted to it, I felt serenity and contentment, since I no longer had to rely on a select few and keep pleading for justice just to have it dismissed and reduced, and then reach a wall like a dead end. When everyone agreed with what we parents thought, it seemed like the floodgates of justice opened, and Jonathan and I immediately grabbed the camera and sat down to discuss it. We really wanted to make a brief movie, but this is not the time or place to go into our entire tale. A few queries as the narrative progressed. The events surrounding Marcus Lamb's passing and Jan's actions afterward became increasingly difficult to overlook, and the accusations and suspicions increased not only inside the Lamb family but also throughout their ministry network. Been a prominent character in Christian media, with his voice resonating through the hearts of millions. His untimely death from complications with COVID-19 left the Christian community in shock and sadness, but in the wake of his passing, more than just sadness spread. It was though still theoretical, the claims of a potential conspiracy surrounding Marcus's death looked to be gathering steam. Joni Lamb, a widow who had supported her husband for decades, was now dealing with both her own grief and the enormous responsibility of raising Daystar without him for months. She openly conveyed the intense grief of losing her spouse, but in private, things seemed to be happening at an unsettlingly rapid pace. Doug Weiss, a counselor with specialized training in sexual addiction and marriage rehabilitation, seemed to be becoming closer to Joni. First, their relationship appeared to be a sympathetic friendship based on mutual loss, but as time went on, it became clear that their relationship had grown beyond simple companionship. The chronology indicated that they had developed a deeper emotionally intimate attachment. Started before Marcus's body was even buried, so we'll be doing some podcasts with incredible individuals and going into the specifics and the deep stuff. We informed a few journalists our tale, and they have complete power over what we've given them. We have no say in it. This is not something that just started, it has been developing for a while, and I'm proud of them for doing their due diligence. We revealed the truth, and they conduct the investigation, which takes months. I assumed that the reason I proposed we make this film was because I was unaware of. Since we've been on TV so much and people have shown us such genuine love, I felt it was cruel to not respond to a few questions that people who truly care about us want answered. Jonathan had a sort of idea about how much it would blow up, and these are 4 of the most frequently asked questions over the past few days include: 1. Why we didn't call the police and why it took so long to speak. 2. Why I didn't touch this man. 3. Why Susie yelled for me to go up instead of her going up herself. And 4. Why we aren't going public. The fact that this bond seemed to develop in the midst of Doug's personal problems was concerning because, at the same time Joni was grieving the loss of Marcus, Doug was divorcing his wife. The two of them filed for divorce in January 2022, only 2 months after Marcus's passing. The timeline suggested a much quicker and more complex bond, and critics immediately pointed out how suspicious it was that he and Joni were already moving forward with plans to be together while Doug was still going through a painful divorce. How could their relationship be seen as pure and wholesome? Leaked audio recordings that appeared online further complicated the accusations of emotional intimacy between Joni and Doug. In these recordings, Joni adamantly denied having inappropriate conversations with Doug before they were married and defended their relationship with fervor. In her defense, she said that the accusations were outright false and denied that anything improper occurred before they were married, but the leaked audio did little to stop the rumors. Doug claimed that their relationship was founded on prayer, faith, and a shared desire for healing. Only increased the conjecture, so let's examine the first one: why didn't we call the police? Well, we did, I believe, twice. To address the second question, why did you wait so long to talk? I would suggest going over the timeline because I think there will be some back and forth because this article is so complicated, so we'll just go in a more efficient manner. We'll do a very condensed version because this will be a brief video, so everything will flow naturally. We have some notes here for the key points, so let's choose. Starting from the beginning, I would say that in the summer of 2020, actually, in the early spring of 2020, my sister noted that my daughter was acting strangely, like she was stiffening up when people approached her. I also noticed it, but I didn't take it very seriously, believing it to be a small part of developing, and then by that summer, we're going to be a little more circumspect about what we say here, but we have to be on a trip, and this man claims that our daughter entered a restroom and saw him completely nude at this point, which is also new too. Since he had told me, I simply said, okay, and I went to check on my child. She appeared to be doing well, so we were both like, okay, I don't know if I even told you or not that day. What made this situation even murkier was the background of personal and. In addition to struggling with the loss of Marcus, Jonathan and Susie Lamb's son and daughter-in-law also had to deal with the unsettling claims of abuse involving their young daughter. Reports indicated that a reliable source within the Lamb family, instead of acting right away to protect the child, the leadership of the Lamb family appeared to repress the truth in favor of the appearance of innocence critics. The Daystar ministry, known only as Pete, had acted with impunity, and attempts to address these allegations had been met with resistance. Despite calls for an independent investigation, the Lambs refused to assist, which only heightened suspicions of a cover-up. Former police officers, among others, described the polygraph tests that were displayed online as weak evidence, claiming they were unreliable and inconclusive. She then begins to change her behavior as the months go by, and in November 2020, she informs me in graphic detail that she has been abused. It was the biggest shock of my life, and I can't even begin to describe how I felt when I went to my. When Jonathan hadn't returned from work at around 5:30 in the evening, I was prepared to jump in the car and head to the police, but this woman I truly trusted said no. Confidant was the person I truly trusted with all of my heart. That was another question. We're going to speak with the teachers. When I spoke to my child that day, she told me, this woman is my mom. You can just say the name. I know it's still difficult, but speaking to a journalist one-on-one is simple, but going public hurts these people we care about. These are not people we despise or are angry with. I apologize for being overly sentimental, but Doug Weiss's involvement in this scandal was even more puzzling. A man with a reputation for professional integrity who specialized in helping people who were going through difficult times appeared to have put himself in a position where his knowledge and possibly his own interests were intricately linked to the Lamb family's own complicated web of sorrow, family conflicts, and contentious choices. His abrupt and quick connection with Joni immediately following her husband's death highlighted the question of whether Doug was serving as a counselor seeking. Joan's defense of Doug only fueled the flames, as she claimed that he had been nothing but a supportive figure who had helped her through one of the darkest times in her life. She spoke passionately about Doug's devotion to helping widows or was using his position of influence for personal gain. His family and his capacity to love her in a way that no one had ever experienced before, she explained, adding that despite the difficulties, Doug had always hoped for a miracle and that his previous marriage had been loveless. However, many critics noted that the speed at which Doug and Joan transitioned from grief to romance seemed out of step with the grieving process. Their relationship had changed from mutual support to engagement in a short of months. Many people wondered if they had actually started dating before Marcus's death or if it had been simmering for a while. So I asked my child, I have no idea. I've never done this before, and I'm not sure what leading questions are. Since her world was so narrow at home school and we sent her to Daystar, I figured it was a school. I asked her if it was at school, and she was uncomfortable and just nodded, so I knew. Counselors have now explained that behavior to me, and everything makes sense. When I asked if it was a girl or a boy, she replied that it was a boy. I asked how tall she was, attempting to determine her age, and she replied that she was taller than her father. That made me feel afraid because that is a man who is only 5 years old. Tell them that it's all right to ramp up the pace. After that, we head to school, and this confidant, whom I trusted, tells me that there is no mail here. The teachers say that everything is fine, that our side of the case is finished, and I inform Jonathan that I don't want. Since there wasn't much going on during this storm, the leadership of the Lamb family at Daystar became even more divided. To get this resolved, I don't want to talk to your family, so let's go to the police. We went to the police, filed our report, and they conducted a brief investigation. Maintained that everything she did was guided by divine guidance, but others, including family members, saw her actions as a betrayal of the legacy Marcus had left behind. As the Lamb family struggled, the harm they had caused to them both personally and professionally became increasingly apparent. To keep Daystar under control, and with each new development. Whether it was the deepening bond between Joni and Doug, the unsettling claims about Pete, or the unwillingness to assist with a third-party investigation, the question of whether this was indeed a story of love and healing or would the Lamb family face the darkness that loomed over them, or would something much darker be at work, the truth that seemed to be just waiting to be revealed? They still conceal themselves behind their public perception, permitting the rumors to continue.